Discover the incredible $755 call that transformed a poor cleaner's daughter's life forever. Mia Torres was wiping down the last of the tables at Java Junction, her breathing steady despite the chaos surrounding her. The hum of chatter and the smell of roasted coffee lingered in the air, cradling her in a fierce desire to escape. The weight of her dual life, a part-time barista and a full-time student, pressed on her small frame. At 22, she held the dreams of 1,000 hopes, yet felt caged by the stereotypes others drummed into her. Just a cleaner's daughter, they whispered, as if those words could bury her aspirations forever. But today seemed different. Today, something extraordinary stirred just beyond the cafe's door. The bell chimed, and in walked Dr. Samuel Hale, a titan in the world of medical research. Mia's pulse quickened. He was a name that sent ripples through university halls. His work was groundbreaking, his influence far-reaching. She held her breath, her hands trembling as she wiped a streak of coffee from the table. Would he notice her? Would he see the ambitious woman behind the apron and the baseball cap? "Can I get you something?" she asked, striving for an air of nonchalance that felt utterly foreign. His kind eyes met hers, and just like that, the world around them faded. This man had transformed lives, yet here he was, seemingly interested in her mundane existence. He asked about her studies, and Mia's conviction bloomed. As she spoke, the words poured from her like coffee from a fresh pot, each sentence rippling with the raw enthusiasm that often eluded her in the glare of judgment. "I can see the fire in you," he said, and she felt something shift inside. Dr. Hale offered to mentor her. The idea felt impossibly weighty. Could she, a girl from the less privileged side of town, be worthy of such a rare opportunity? Doubt crept in, whispering that she might still be just a cleaner's daughter. The thought twisted her stomach. Heavens, would she always be defined by her mother's sacrifices? Before she could respond, a new noise broke through her thoughts. An announcement floating down the university halls. A $755 million grant up for grabs to fund innovative research. This was Mia's chance to silence the whispers of inadequacy forever. But how could she harness the spark she felt in that cafe? What if she stumbled? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As her application took shape, murmurings of doubt began to swirl around her. The same institutional prejudice that had hunted her all her life was now threatening to overtake her at university. With every chastising glance from peers, her resolve faltered. She discovered hidden family ties to the scientific community that could either launch her into the spotlight or crush her under the weight of expectations. With each keystroke, her fingers danced between hope and despair, the clock ticking mercilessly toward the grant announcement. Then came that moment, the return of a familiar face, someone from her past, challenging her credibility. Mia's heart raced as they questioned her worth, pulling rug after rug from beneath her feet. Would her years of struggle amount to nothing? The stakes hadn't just escalated, they were peaking, and as she stood on the precipice of potential failure, something deep within her roared for defiance. Would she seize the moment and prove them all wrong, or drown in the rising tide of anxiety? The answer hung tantalizingly and intensely just beyond reach, as shadows of uncertainty loomed larger than ever. Mia leaned back, her heart pounding against her ribcage as fear washed over her, leaving a residue of self-doubt. The familiar face from her past loomed large, a specter haunting her every step forward. For years, Ethan had been the one to point out flaws, the one to laugh when she stumbled. Now his skepticism crept back into her thoughts, blending with criticisms she had worked so hard to push aside. But this was not the time to crumble. Dr. Hale had seen something in her. The light of hope ignited, brightening the dark corner of her mind. She turned to her laptop and began to type again, drawing on the research she had started prior to the cafe encounter. Each word was intentional, a building block against the walls of doubt. She poured herself into the application, mindful that it wasn't simply about the grant. It was about her future. Days bled into nights as Mia transformed her living space into a makeshift research center, books stacked precariously on every surface. Her dorm room, once a simple living space, had morphed into a crucible of ideas and ambitions. She stretched her intellectual muscles, calling upon all the resources her university provided. Fueled by caffeine and determination, her energy soared. With Dr. Hale on her side, she drew upon his vast knowledge to refine her proposal. Bi-weekly meetings turned into strategic planning sessions, where his mentorship guided her understanding of scientific research's intricacies. She embraced constructive criticism, no longer stinging from the sharp edges of judgment, but rather welcoming it as part of the process. As self-doubt still flickered like a candle in the wind, she faced it head-on. On one particularly restless night, she slid her laptop closed, revisited her lineage and its weight. She chose to embrace it. If the legacy of her family was strength forged in struggle, she could wield it like a sword. This was her opportunity to redefine her narrative. Loading her final draft into the grant application portal felt monumental. Was she ready? This was the moment. She took a deep breath, filled with courage, and clicked submit. The act itself tethered her heart. Whether or not she succeeded, she was on her own course now. However, the elation was short-lived. In the days that followed, her old fears re-emerged with a vengeance. Whispers about who she was, about being a cleaner's daughter, emerged with sharp clarity. Those shadows from her past began to convene again. The shadows morphed into obstacles as peers expressed doubt about her eligibility and capability. They tossed barbs cloaked in camaraderie. What would someone like you even contribute to such a prestigious grant? Mia clenched her fists as she listened. She was more than the daughter of a cleaner, and she vowed to prove it. Knowing she had already come this far, she recognized that she had two choices: sink into the depth of their pity, or rise above and start confronting each challenge as they arose. That resolve solidified when she overheard a conversation between two professors discussing the upcoming grant announcement. They speculated about the grantees, assigning odds based on stereotypes. The fire within Mia blazed brighter. She needed to confront the prejudices head-on, to show them the depth of her knowledge and determination. Armed with newfound purpose, she drafted a plan. It required meticulous preparation, public speaking, and building rapport within the academic community. She would not only apply for the grant, she would stand in front of the committee, delivering her proposal with conviction. Would they see her for who she truly was, not just the label they had assigned her? With only weeks left, Mia set her sights on that committee room, the stakes higher than ever. As she practiced her speech in the mirror, her voice trembled, yet an unwavering whisper in her mind pressed her to hold firm. The moment was drawing near, and she could either falter or fight. A flash of doubt flickered. What would she do if they rejected her outright? But she amplified the roar in her heart. Relenting to the fears of potential failure wasn't an option. The clock was ticking down to the presentation. Could she transform their perceptions? With her mind racing, she gathered her determination, stepping into a future she could finally claim for herself. The moment of truth was approaching, and Mia understood deep in her gut that nothing would prepare her more than facing the truth of who she was and who she was becoming. With just days remaining, Mia sensed the energy shift around her. Could her fire really outshine the shadows? The question lingered like an electrifying challenge, begging for resolution that only time could provide. As the days dwindled down to the decisive moment, Mia's heart thrummed with both anticipation and dread. She had spent countless hours refining her presentation, convinced that every detail mattered in a world that thrived on perception. Over the past few weeks, she transformed her fear into fuel, meticulously crafting her message to highlight her research's significance and her unique perspective. She visualized the committee members, their expressions, their biases, and she resolved to dismantle their preconceptions, one slide at a time. Standing in front of the mirror one last time, Mia straightened her posture, imbuing herself with the confidence she had for so long struggled to nurture. The reflection staring back at her was both familiar and changed, an evolution forged through grit, intellect, and sleepless nights. Here was more than just a cleaner's daughter. This was a woman poised to claim her rightful place in academia. The day of the presentation came with a thick atmosphere of expectation that clung to her skin like fog. Walking into the lecture hall, the grandeur of the room took her breath away. It was a stage, the kind reserved for the champions of ideas. As she approached the podium, Mia recognized that this was where she would redefine herself, not just in front of others, but to herself. The whispers of doubt echoed loudly within her. Yet another voice, stronger now, urged her to silence them. When the moment arrived, she commanded the room. Mia's voice was steady, laced with a passion driven by her struggles and triumphs. She outlined her research methodically. But it was the personal anecdotes, stories of her family's resilience, that truly resonated. She saw some nodding, perhaps losing themselves in the authenticity of her narrative. Yet a few faces remained skeptical, eyebrows raised, arms crossed. The tension served as a challenge. She wasn't merely fighting for a grant. She was battling prejudice, inviting them to see beyond the surface. Midway through her presentation, a lingering thought surfaced. Everything she had achieved thus far could crumble if they remained unconvinced. Had all her hard work, sleepless nights, and persistent efforts been sufficient? The fear was palpable, intertwining with her determination. As questions flowed from the committee, a sudden inquiry shifted the dynamics. A professor probed into Mia's interpretations regarding her research's implications for underrepresented communities. A flicker of indignation surged within her. Here was the opportunity she had prepared for. Through my own experiences, I've witnessed the disparities in access to resources, she articulated, carefully framing her words. I aim not just to contribute academically, but to innovate solutions grounded in real lived experiences. They listened, skeptical yet intrigued, as she morphed the conversation. In that tension-filled moment, she sensed something shifting, the collective energy from the committee beginning to thaw. It was the realization that her path, marred with struggle, was the very essence that could elevate her work. The presentation concluded to a muted silence, her heart hammering like a drum. Mia left the stage, feeling raw but unbroken. She had fought against the chains of doubt, asserting her worth in a world that often overlooked the stories behind the labels. Later that evening, her phone buzzed with notifications. As she scrolled through messages, her heart raced again, her pulse quickening as she stumbled across a video clip discussing her presentation. Among the glowing remarks from faculty, Ethan's acerbic comments resurfaced in her mind, but they no longer held dominion. She had faced an army of naysayers and emerged stronger. But now the real question loomed larger. What if the unexpected response to her presentation unveiled an even deeper challenge? With the announcement of the grant winners just days away, she was faced with the uncertainties of judgment and potential rejection again. But amidst all her fears, a defiant spark ignited within her. She would be ready, regardless of the outcome. Mia's future was now in motion, but was she prepared for what the decision would reveal about not just her work, but who she truly was? Anxiety coiled in her gut. The realization set in. The journey was far from over. With her heart racing again, she understood her transformation could be just beginning. What awaited her next? The following days unfolded in a haze of anxiety tinged with excitement as Mia awaited the grant announcement. Each morning, she woke with a knot in her stomach, haunted by the prospect of rejection. Yet, buried beneath the worry lay a burgeoning resolve. She had poured her heart into that presentation, wielding her experiences like armor. Striding through the campus, she noticed her surroundings with new eyes. The sun bathed the brick pathways in warm light, but the shadows of doubt lingered. Affiliate meetings buzzed with animated discussions, yet Mia found herself lost in her thoughts. Each interaction felt significant, each word uttered by her peers a potential marker of her worth. In the following days, the anxiety morphed into an itch. Mia sought solace in her research, submerging herself in the intricacies she had become accustomed to, but even that felt insufficient. The thrill of her recent accomplishment began to fade, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty about what awaited her. Was this effort to reshape perceptions worth it if the approval never materialized? Ethan's criticisms returned to haunt her thoughts every time she sat down to work. The bite of his dismissive demeanor resonated, and she found herself defending the authenticity of her journey in her mind. Drawing on her family's struggles brought clarity, but self-doubt resurfaced as she picked apart the validity of her narrative woven through data and analysis. To combat the encroaching darkness, Mia developed a plan. Drawing inspiration from journals of other women in academia, she committed to surrounding herself with success stories that mirrored her own and her struggles. At lunch, she pored over articles about groundbreaking women in her field, taking notes and crafting a roadmap of potential paths leading toward a brighter future. Each page she turned restored a fragment of her self-belief, grounding her in the realization that every accomplished figure had faced adversities that shaped their resilience. As the days passed, conversations with classmates shifted slightly. They began to challenge her opinions more readily, urging her to articulate her thoughts beyond academia and to defend her research with even greater passion. Mia accepted the challenge, testing her mettle in debates and discussions that spurred her own critical thinking. This dynamic push led her to discover additional dimensions of her knowledge, unveiling insights she had overlooked before. Finally, the evening of the announcement dawned. The hall buzzed with tension, an amalgamation of excitement and fear. Mia could feel her heart thrumming in sync with the energy surrounding her, every pulse igniting latent hope. As she joined the assembled crowd, the curtain of doubt drew back enough for her to glimpse possibility. This atmosphere reminded her of the presentation, a stage built not just for judgment, but for exploration and validation. She felt ready. Whatever the outcome, she had already drawn strength from her experiences, shedding the constraints on her own story, even if they remained unrecognized by others. As the names were called, each one struck her like a bolt, reverberating in her core until one name rang out over the rest, echoing in her ears and igniting a rush of emotion. But then came a pause, a weighty stillness as the envelope popped open, and her heart sunk, already anticipating the impending words that may deepen her doubts. Yet just as fast as concern gripped her, determination resurfaced, reminding her of what she had already achieved. The struggle was merely stepping stones along the path, but would this moment be where she made a definitive leap forward or fall back into shadows? The announcement revealed the grant winners, but each name brought a growing realization. Had she prepared for the reality that not everyone could see the value of her journey? As she moved back to her seat, she felt a shift within herself. She was ready to navigate whatever this next chapter would bring, embracing the uncertainty. But even as she forged ahead, there lingered the awareness of something pivotal. A reckoning awaited, shaped by who she would choose to be next. Would she confront her own expectations, redefine her dreams, and emerge not just as another contender, but as a true force in her field? The moment of truth arrived, threatening to impact not just her professional trajectory, but the very essence of who she was becoming. How would she respond when her identity hung in the balance? In the days following the announcement, Mia felt the dual weight of disappointment and a burgeoning sense of purpose. Each morning unfolded with the same knot in her stomach, yet it was now accompanied by the fire she kindled from within, an insistent call to redefine her trajectory. While her colleagues celebrated their wins, she sought refuge in solitude, dissecting her emotions, searching for meaning in the absence of recognition. Mornings were filled with quiet resolve as she began to set daily intentions, not just for her work, but for herself. She had learned that failure didn't dictate her worth. It merely unveiled the layers of strength she hadn't fully understood. Instead of immersing in despair, she decided to delve deeper into her research, determined to uncover brilliant facets that she could bring to light. Mia targeted her weaknesses head-on. The criticism she had once felt stung with every reminder of her capacity to rise above, while voices of naysayers slowly transformed from wounds into motivation. Ethan's dismissive comments resurfaced, but instead of stifling her voice, they lit a fuse. She began experimenting with more daring ideas for her research, pushing against the confines of traditional narratives that had constrained her previously. A week later, as sunlight streamed through her window, illuminating her cluttered desk, she had an epiphany. The stories of other women in academia had created a ripple effect within her. She realized that her journey wasn't just about proving herself, but sharing her truth. Powered by the stories of resilience she had absorbed, she crafted a bold agenda, not to merely seek validation, but to disrupt the narrative landscape of her field itself. Her coffee breaks morphed into brainstorming sessions. She reached out to former mentors for guidance, not merely for accolades, but to gain the wisdom that came from experiences similar to her own. The dialogues were invigorating. They charged her spirit and infused her approach with fresh energy. Most importantly, those discussions nurtured the reality that if she presented her work authentically, flaws and triumphs alike, people would respond. Then, a serendipitous moment arrived when she received an email inviting her to present at a small symposium. It felt like the spark she had been waiting for. Mia furiously prepared, integrating everything she had learned and the new direction her research had taken. The event didn't carry the weight of a grant announcement, but it was an opportunity she realized could amplify her voice when done right. This was her chance to own her narrative and confront those who were skeptical of her contributions. As the date approached, her anticipation brewed. Would her approach be well received? Would she finally be able to articulate the depth of her struggle and resilience without fear of judgment? There was an electricity in her veins. She felt both terrified and utterly exhilarated. On the day of the symposium, her palms were clammy, yet her heart thrummed with a newfound certainty. Even if she fell flat, it wouldn't define her. This was about taking a step forward, about what she could learn from that experience, regardless of the outcome. As she stepped into the auditorium, facing a crowd that buzzed with anticipation, a clarity washed over her. It no longer mattered if she had won a grant or if she caught a critic's eye. What mattered was this: standing tall, owning every word, and laying down her truth with the intention of forging connections. But deep down, a question lingered. If she could reshape her identity amidst scrutiny and challenge what others had set for her, how far could she really go? The answer awaited her as she took a breath, preparing to embrace the moment, unaware of the profound implications it would soon set in motion. Would she truly redefine her place in academia? Or would the impending confrontation reveal not just her strengths, but the vulnerabilities she hadn't yet acknowledged? The atmosphere inside the auditorium crackled with anticipation. Mia stood at the podium, her heart racing as she surveyed the audience, a mix of seasoned academics and fresh faces eager to absorb knowledge. But amid the faces, familiar ones loomed larger, their skeptical expressions heavy on her heart like weights dragging her down. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and began to speak. The words flowed more freely than she anticipated, carving a pathway through her nervousness. The story she shared was not just rooted in data or frameworks. It was ultimately a narrative of her journey, a reflection of nights spent grappling with self-doubt, echoes of harsh critiques, and ties of inspiration from her mentors. Each word encapsulated a gem from her hard-fought introspection, inviting the audience to walk alongside her in the labyrinth of her academic life. As she transitioned into her research findings, she felt an exhilarating shift within her. Instead of just sharing cold statistics and methodologies, she framed her research within the personal. The bold agenda she had crafted took shape in the minds of those listening, a canvas reflecting both her expertise and her vulnerabilities. For the first time, she felt herself connecting with the audience on a level transcending mere academic discourse. She could see nods of understanding and glimpses of compassion in their eyes. However, just as she began to feel confident, a familiar figure caught her attention: Ethan. Leaning back in his chair, a dismissive smirk creased his lips, seemingly poised to pick apart her narrative. A swell of doubt threatened to cloud her moment, urging her to retreat into familiar insecurity. But in that pivotal moment, her resolve hardened. This wasn't about him. It was about her truth, her story. As her presentation continued, she pivoted her focus to the broader implications of her findings, challenging the norms of her field. It was as if she was wielding a sword, striking down the barriers set by those who had doubted her worth. The fire she'd kindled within was now a roaring blaze, illuminating not just her work, but her spirit. When she concluded with her latest research proposals, there was a moment of silence. She could hear her heart pounding in her ears. Then, applause erupted, washing over her like a tide. It was followed by a few enthusiastic questions that transformed into a lively discourse. Here was the validation she desperately sought, not just from accolades, but from genuine engagement. Her colleagues were leaning in, connecting with her findings, challenging aspects of her work, and in those discussions, she caught a glimpse of the impact she could make. But as the crowd dispersed, Mia overheard a dismissive murmur from Ethan, cutting through the enthusiasm. "Just another story trying to disguise weaknesses as strengths," he said, half laughing to a colleague. The weight of his words hung in the air, a stark reminder that old narratives die hard. Mia felt a flicker of doubt cross her mind, yet she quickly countered it. She had stood tall, faced the skeptics, and found her voice. That was her strength, an armor forged in adversity. But would this newfound confidence withstand future trials? Would she be able to confront not just Ethan but the pervasive skepticism she felt in the shadows? As she returned home that evening, a quiet determination began to pulse through her veins. She felt both liberated and restless. If she could dismantle the facade of criticism today, what would it take to transcend her challenges moving forward? Tomorrow she'd seek more dialogue, more mentorship, and perhaps bravery enough to confront Ethan directly. But what she didn't anticipate was a knock on her door that very night. An unexpected guest with a proposition that could change everything. Mia hesitated only for a brief moment when she opened the door. Standing in the dim light of her entryway was a tall figure, somewhat familiar, yet enveloped in a shroud of uncertainty. It was Dr. Lila Hastings, a respected senior researcher known for groundbreaking work in Mia's field. She had always seen Lila from a distance, an unreachable beacon of success and nobility. But now, that same figure stood before her with an unusual intensity in her eyes. "Can I come in?" Lila asked, brushing an errant strand of hair behind her ear, a flicker of urgency shadowing her expression. "Of course," Mia replied, masking her surprise and attempting to stave off the inherent skepticism that bubbled beneath the surface. Once settled in her modest living room, Lila's demeanor shifted from professional to intimate. "I watched your presentation today. Impressive work, Mia," she said, the gravity of her tone weaving a mix of admiration and appraisal. "Thank you," Mia said, her imposter syndrome gnawing at her confidence. Was she really earning praise from someone like Lila? "But I heard what Ethan said afterward," Lila continued, the tension in her voice thickening the air. "And it's not the first time I've seen him dismiss talent in the name of reputation. That's why I'm here." Mia straightened, both intrigued and anxious. "Why would that matter to you?" "Because I want to extend an opportunity," Lila said, leaning forward, her eyes locked onto Mia's. "There's a project under development that I think aligns perfectly with your research. I need someone with your unique perspective." A whirlwind of emotions surged within Mia. She had been seeking ways to push her work further, but never did she imagine that Lila would consider her for such a prominent role. "What kind of project?" she asked, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. Lila smiled faintly, outlining her vision, her words painting vivid images of a collaborative endeavor that could potentially redefine aspects of their field. Yet as Lila spoke, Mia began to sense an undercurrent of pressure. There were stakes involved, elevated expectations, an arena where she would be fighting for credibility amidst towering giants. Mia recognized the challenge ahead. This was not merely an invitation, it was a test. Could she rise to the occasion? Would she claim her place among the elite, or would she shrink back into her old narrative, overshadowed by others? Her mind raced through possibilities and outcomes, each carrying its own weight of responsibility. As Lila left, her invitation lingered in Mia's thoughts like a haunting melody. She knew she had to come to terms with Ethan's lingering doubts and her own inner critic. The desire to prove herself gnawed at her relentlessly. Yet doubt doubled back, uncomfortably familiar. What if she failed? Mia took a moment to reflect. The overnight prospect had given her a double-edged sword sort of feeling, beckoning her toward a leap of faith while holding tightly to her fears. She had to decide soon whether to embrace the challenges ahead or retreat to the comfort of a safer, less scrutinized role. More than mere academic recognition, this was an evolution of her identity, As she wrestled with the implications of Lila's proposition, Mia felt both an exhilarating stir of ambition and a disquieting fear. Tomorrow, she would map out her response. Armed with the knowledge of who she had become through adversity, she would draft a plan to confront not just the responsibilities of this new opportunity, but the annihilation of her past insecurities. And as her resolve crystallized, a deeper voice beneath her doubts told her that facing Ethan, not merely earning his respect, was the true battleground she needed to conquer next. But right now, beneath the glow of a solitary lamp, Mia's phone buzzed with urgency, illuminating a message that would pull her deeper into a whirlwind of disruption. "Meet me tomorrow. It's important." Who was it, and what awaited her that could spiral her nascent confidence into chaos? Mia sat on her couch, the harsh glow of the phone screen contrasting sharply with the fading daylight outside. She read the message again. "Meet me tomorrow. It's important." A wave of unease twisted in her stomach. The sender was unlisted, the gravity of the request palpable. Was this yet another challenge to her sense of worth, or an unexpected opportunity? She shook off the thought, pulling herself back into the present. Lila's words echoed in her mind. She had an opportunity to carve a new path, and she needed to act on it. But first, this mysterious invitation needed deciphering. Mia spent the night pacing her tiny apartment, her mind a cacophony of possibilities. The project with Lila flickered like a lighthouse, guiding her through doubt. This was her chance to shift the narrative from Ethan's dismissive remarks to a story that centered around her competence and intuition. She dug through her research notes, reacquainting herself with her findings, each page igniting a fresh pulse of confidence. The next morning dawned bright yet heavy with expectation. Mia dressed purposefully, selecting her analytical persona over the version of herself that sometimes cowered behind self-doubt. She chose a blouse that felt empowering, a subtle reminder of her capabilities. As she made her way through the city, the usual rush became a blur, her mind fixated on what Lila had proposed. The thought of collaborating with someone she idolized filled her with both excitement and anxiety. Tossing aside the what-ifs, she focused on the "I can." She arrived at the small cafe where the meeting was set, its cozy atmosphere a stark contrast to her racing heart. The urgency of the message still lingered, a breadcrumb trailing her into an unknown destiny. A part of her expected recognition, perhaps someone eager to offer mentorship or advice. But the other part feared confrontation, a reality check on her perceived capabilities. When she stepped inside, a familiar face caught her eye. It was Ethan, engrossed in conversation with another colleague. The sight of him ignited old tensions. Her mind flashed back to his smirk during her presentation. Mia took a deep breath, reminding herself that today was about seizing control of her narrative. Finding a corner table, she ordered coffee and settled into her thoughts, mentally preparing for both the meeting and any unexpected encounters. Time crawled, and she pondered who might approach her. Was it about her research, or perhaps a dismissal once again? The questions loomed larger, gnawing at her focus. Suddenly her phone buzzed. Not an alert of incoming news, but a voice she'd never expected. It was Lila, who had arrived earlier than expected. As Lila approached the table, Mia felt the weight of uncertainty mixed with anticipation. "Thank you for coming," Lila said, her voice warm yet earnest. "I hope I've caught you in time." "For what?" Mia asked, confusion etched on her brow. "There's something vital we must discuss, about you, your work, and a potential collaboration that could thrust your research into a new spotlight." Mia leaned in, eyes widening. Was this the moment she had aimed for? "First, I want to be transparent. Your name came up in conversation during a significant funding proposal," Lila continued, her expression serious. "But there's someone standing in the way, someone influential who doubts your capabilities and has the power to sway decisions." Mia's heart raced. The shaky ground she had worried about stood before her in stark reality. She had to confront Ethan's looming presence, which now felt like it was more than a personal rivalry. It was a battleground, and the stakes were higher than she could fathom. "Are you willing to fight for this?" Lila asked, fearlessness radiating from her gaze. "To disrupt the narrative that's been written about you?" Mia paused, recounting the evolving plot of her life. claiming her identity, professional growth, and now this challenge. She couldn't hide behind anyone else's doubts. She had to stand firm. "I am," she said, not just with her words but with an unyielding spirit ready for the battle ahead. But there was something more that nagged at her, a hidden anxiety. Why would she need to take this stand? Why her? Just as she sorted through her apprehensions, the universe seemed to tilt with the potential revelation. A fleeting thought shot through her mind. A direct confrontation with Ethan was inevitable. What would it reveal about their rivalry? What might emerge from the shadows, hidden truths that had yet to surface? As she prepared her thoughts, Mia couldn't shake the feeling of being on the cusp of something transformative. But that gnawing uncertainty remained, threatening to undermine her resolve. And before she could organize her emerging strategy, Lila's phone buzzed and she leaned back, her eyes widening at the screen. "I need to take this," she said, rising quickly. "It could change everything. Wait here." As Lila moved away, Mia's heart pounded, staring at the door. What was unfolding? How would these moments shift everything she thought she knew? The storm of change was at her doorstep, and soon she'd have to step into the maelstrom itself. Mia tapped her fingers against the table, the rhythm echoing her heightened pulse as she watched Lila's figure disappear into the crowd. The cafe was cloaked in a haze of idle chatter, filled with strangers exchanging half-hearted smiles, but to Mia, the world had narrowed down to the escalating tension in her chest. She was teetering on the edge of a pivotal moment, the potential for a shift in narrative dancing in front of her. The scent of brewed coffee enveloped her, momentarily distracting her from swirling thoughts of confrontation with Ethan and what that would entail. Could she truly stand her ground against someone who had effortlessly sidelined her in the past? She gathered her research notes, flipping through pages filled with ideas that had once seemed like fragile dreams. This time, they burned with a new urgency. The sudden swoosh of the cafe door diverted her attention. As she turned, she spotted Lila returning, her expression charged. "Mia," Lila called, urgency knitted in her brow. "We need to act fast. There's an upcoming presentation, one that could lead to considerable funding. You would pitch your ideas directly to the board." Excitement was abruptly interlaced with anxiety. "Isn't that too soon? I haven't fully prepared," Mia said, the concern contradicting her instinct to rush forward. Lila's eyes softened, but her resolve remained unyielding. "You've prepared your entire life for moments like this. Besides, you can't let doubt dictate your decisions any longer." With those words, Mia felt a flicker of renewed confidence. She had dismissed opportunities throughout her career, allowing quiet insecurities to overshadow her potential. Today felt like it could be different, especially if she let Lila's steadfast belief guide her. "Okay, I'm in," Mia asserted, taking a deep breath to align her thoughts. "What's the plan?" "It's a collaborative session," Lila detailed, her tone deliberately measured. "You'll need to showcase your research findings while also highlighting how your work adds value. I believe there's an avenue to address the concerns about your capabilities head-on." Mia nodded, mentally constructing a framework for her presentation, strategically planning tactics to counter any doubt. Each word could either affirm her competence or reconstruct the narrative surrounding her. For the first time, she felt in command of her story. As they focused on details, a realization struck her. This project was more than an opportunity for funding. It was a chance to redefine how others viewed her and, more importantly, how she viewed herself. The battle with Ethan wasn't solely about proving him wrong. It was about her. With newfound determination, Mia devoured the concept of crafting her story as much as her research. The hours ticked by, blending into a whirlwind of notes, charts, and promises of what could be if she dared to challenge the narrative tethering her to doubt. Each statistic, each compelling argument she fashioned, felt like a nail puncturing the bubble of insecurity surrounding her. Just as they reached the finalizing stage, Lila's phone buzzed again, piercing through their focused atmosphere. "Mia," Lila said, her complexion lightening. "This is it. My contact just got off the line. They're supportive. But there's something I need to tell you about the funding proposal. It involves Ethan." Mia's heart sank at the mention of his name. She had mentally prepared for him, Yet as she pieced together an image of Ethan standing before her, confidence faltered. "What about him?" she asked, trying to maintain composure despite her racing thoughts. "He's pushing for a different candidate, someone less experienced, but whom he sees as a malleable ally," Lila replied almost with disbelief. "We need to counter that narrative. You need to confront him directly, not just professionally, but personally." Mia felt a chill pass through her spine as she recognized the implications. Confronting Ethan, once a terrorizing thought, was evolving into a necessary step. The burden of self-doubt was beginning to shift, replaced by an energy for proactive confrontation. Instead of recoiling from potential failure, she suddenly perceived that her success hinged not just on her capabilities, but on her willingness to step into the fray. Could she really confront him? Could she truly navigate this interpersonal minefield? As Lila detailed their strategy further, Mia felt her determination crystallizing. They weren't merely plotting a professional reclamation, it was a comprehensive challenge to her identity. She envisioned standing before Ethan, explaining her vision, underscoring her worth, confronting not only him but the parts of herself that had remained silent for too long. And as they mapped the way forward, Mia's mind began swirling again, this time transforming her fear into a fierce resolve. Ethan had doubted her before, but now he was unwittingly fueling her fire. The confrontation was unavoidable, a collision course that could either reinforce the walls she felt trapped behind, or shatter them entirely. With each pulse of determination, Mia realized that this was her moment. The time had come for her to challenge not just a colleague, but the very elements of her identity that had kept her bound and silent. Before she knew it, her thoughts turned towards the day ahead. What revelation lay in store? What would she discover about herself when she faced the ultimate barrier? The upcoming presentation loomed ahead, a test of her newfound resolve, testing everything she believed about herself and her own potential. As the door to self-assurance began to swing wide, Mia felt the thrill of what lay beyond. Would she embrace her transformation or retreat into the shadows once more? The stakes had never felt so real or so high. The day of the presentation dawned bright with the fiery promise of change, and Mia stood in front of the mirror, inhaling deeply as she reminded herself of who she had become. The reflection staring back was not the timid girl burdened by her past. It was a woman transformed into a force ready to challenge the stereotypes that had once trapped her. She dressed with intention, wearing her favorite blazer, an unspoken armor that made her feel both empowered and invincible. Arriving at the university's sprawling conference hall, Mia's heart thundered against her ribs. Today was not merely a battle for academic recognition. This was her arena to dismantle the shadows of doubt and confront the lingering specter of Ethan. The stakes were staggeringly high, and as she navigated the crowd, the buzz of conversations felt electric, resonating within her like the thrum of an impending storm. When the time for her presentation arrived, Mia walked onto the stage, determined, standing confidently before a panel that included Lila, and yes, Ethan, who wore a mask of casual indifference. As she settled herself behind the podium, the tremors of fear gave way to an undeniable thrill. She was there to assert her narrative, not just to defend her capabilities but to reclaim her identity. With her voice steady, she opened her presentation. Each statistic was laced with personal significance, revealing how her research was influenced by the very struggles she had once feared would define her. The stories of her family's resilience danced interlaced with data and analysis, creating a tapestry rich in intricate detail. She could feel the shift in the room, the air thick with intrigue as she painted her vision, not just showcasing her project, but inviting them into her world. At one moment she locked eyes with Ethan, his brows furrowed slightly, perhaps sensing the gravity of her words. It fueled Mia's resolve, and she pressed onward, refusing to flinch when a challenging question from him arose. "But what makes you think your perspective adds any real value?" He had the audacity to ask, his tone dripping with the same skepticism she had faced countless times before. Mia's heart raced, but instead of retreating into herself, she leaned in. "Because my perspective is born of lived experience," she replied, her voice echoing with conviction. "It's about more than the research. It's about the people whose stories we aim to elevate through this knowledge." This work recognizes the systemic injustices that too often go unaddressed. For the first time, she saw Ethan shift in his seat, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his expression. Each moment she spent addressing the panel and audience felt less like a performance and more like a declaration of self. She demonstrated her expertise, articulating complex ideas with clarity that reflected her hard work and blossoming confidence. When the presentation concluded, there was an electrifying silence followed by a suave wave of applause. Mia felt her cheeks flush with pride, but even more significant was the empowerment coursing through her veins. She had made her mark, not in spite of her background, but precisely because of it. In the days that followed, the buzz around her presentation transformed into tangible opportunities. The university administration took notice, eager to offer her roles that leaned on both mentorship and project leadership. Amongst this whirlwind of recognition, her colleagues no longer cast dubious glances. Instead, they sought her insights and expertise. When the final decision on the funding proposal arrived, Mia held her breath. She had come to realize that her worth was no longer tethered to any singular outcome. It was her journey, the relentless pursuit of improvement and the clarity of her own identity, that mattered. And then it happened. The announcement came, and her name lit up the screen as one of the recipients. Waves of disbelief surged in her, quickly replaced by triumph. She had done it. She was no longer just the cleaner's daughter. She was Mia Torres, a recognized scholar ready to make a difference in her field. As she celebrated this hard-earned victory, it became strikingly clear. Mia was no longer defined by the stereotypes of others. She had rewritten her narrative. She went on to collaborate with Lila, drawing on collective strengths to further research that addressed issues she deeply cared about, pushing boundaries alongside allies who appreciated her contributions. Mia's story became one of transformation, not just for herself, but for those searching for their voices amidst silence. She stood taller, radiating a newfound confidence, and knew that she could conquer any obstacle ahead. It was a journey of self-discovery, marked by courageous confrontations and the unwillingness to surrender to doubt. Reflecting on all she had achieved, Mia embraced a profound sense of fulfillment, fully aware that her growth was a continuous journey. She prepared for the next chapter, armed with the recognition and respect she had fought so tirelessly to earn. And just like that, Mia Torres, once known as the cleaner's daughter, had indeed transformed her life forever. This is your moment to seize every opportunity. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire true transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and boost personal overcoming narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about Mia's phenomenal journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and draw strength for their own paths. You need to show your support right now. Don't wait even one more second to help elevate these compelling stories of growth.